Welcome to the Movement Podcast. This show is all about movement, giving you a better idea of how you can optimize the human body to be the best it can be.
Welcome back to the Movement Podcast. We've been absent for quite a while.
Where the hell have you been?
I mean, it wasn't a sabbatical. I'll promise you that. Gray and I are excited to kick this season off. We've got a lot of things we're going to be getting into this entire season. And we have been working really hard on a lot of new things that I think will, honestly, Gray, remove the barriers, in my opinion, to entering into our philosophy and methodology. And when I say remove the barriers, you can consume our education any multitude of ways. You can, listen to the podcast. You can go online, go onto YouTube. We got a lot of quote unquote free education out there and a lot of information out there that you can gather. But when you really want to get in the weeds and learn FMS, we have our education. And that education, quite honestly, comes at a cost because it allows Gray and I to do what we do. And then if you really want to use our tools, that's where it becomes, put it into practice. How do I put this into practice? Well, really what we've been doing the last couple of years is expanding, how we look at movement and thinking, what are the other things that look at movement? And that gets to wellness and other lifestyle components that we've been talking about for years. That's not new. But with the release of our wellness course, with the release of Symmio, our functional wellness screen, we really have removed a lot of the, as I call them, barriers to start engaging more with our philosophy.
No, and a long, long time ago, a bunch of us met in the kitchen at Holbrook and Main Street in Danville, Virginia, and off the clock, we vetted the movement screen in about 8 months, okay? Everybody's moved on and gone on. You and I stayed on that journey, and it's literally, to me, felt like we're back in the kitchen because when you and I just finished our lecture tour of the summer, 4 different cities, about 100 people or more in the room just to hear us talk about our pre-con, show of hands shows about 70 to 75% saw us for the first time live. Now, number one, that tells me that you guys are supporting us in all the media that we try to generate. But what Lee was talking about is we took a completely different approach to function than we've ever taken before. We learned from the movement screen that we can do less screens for less active people. We also learned from the movement screen that if you're going to completely train an athlete, you got to do some capacity screens too. But what we found out in the room is we're not even fixing ourselves. Healthcare and fitness professionals, strength conditioning professionals, we're not fixing ourselves because when we come to the room, you got me last week for saying this. Lee usually opens what we do, but I walked out and it hit me in a very, very important way that I'm getting ready to lecture to, 110 focused people looking right at me, and they have absolutely no idea that 25 years ago, it used to take us about 15 minutes to movement screen one person. And 30 minutes from the time I started talking, Lee already had everybody in the room movement screened and actually did what I would call a bare minimum screen on the other 7 domains that support movement.
Yeah, and I think so you hit on something, Gray, that has been part of our fundamental philosophy going back 25 some years, and that's what's the minimum that you need? What's the minimum amount of data you need to make a decision? We could argue all day about some of that information, about how much data you can collect. Well, Lee, I need more. You can always get more.
Yep.
It'd be great to have more, but let's be honest, you're not getting any more time, you're getting less. People sitting in front of you want to know what are you going to do to fix them? Real time, like now. People want now. And the only way to really do that is figure out, all right, what's the minimum amount of information I can collect right now to then give you the best information about you.
Okay.
On what you need to do.
No, and that's it. It's and that, by the way, that statement is stoicism at its best. That's not a cop-out. When you're thinking through with logic, you've got to take yourself to the worst case scenario and say, how little information can I make the next step with? And so when Lee and I get in debates or panel discussions or whatever, we know how to optimize a situation, right? Get out your checkbook. take a lot of time, mark off your calendar because it ain't going to happen quick. But if I've got to answer your question about low back pain, there's a minimum of questions I got to ask you, or all you're going to get's Google, and Google's going to tell you what the average consumption is. It's not going to tell you what you specifically need. And so everybody wants a tailored situation, but everybody wants to get that at general buffet prices. And including us, right? Just give me the bullet. But by going to that bare minimum, we don't have to argue anymore. If you're going to give me less than this, I think I'd like to withhold my opinion professionally because it won't be a responsible thing. And so if people are answering your health, fitness, wellness, and even sports conditioning questions without actually sampling the two major things that are going to determine your outcome, how recovered are you on an average cycle, and what kind of stress loads are you under, they're basically just reading you something they read somewhere else in a general forum or platform. And so if you're truly going to give unique information, you've got to collect some unique data, but paralysis by analysis and a data dump is not what we're talking about.
I'm going to give you an example here, Gray, a personal example. And that's why it's important to start with screening, because what Gray just described right there is if you start with a screen and don't automatically start with this deep dive in assessing or testing everything, start with the screen, determine what's a priority. What is the number one thing you need to focus on right now? Here's my story. I go to the eye doctor because I was trying to get contacts, order a new set of contacts, and the eye doctors have figured it out. You can't order a new set of contacts without seeing them at least once a year. So I had to go to the eye doctor so I can get my new contacts, right? So I walk in and I would argue, technician takes me back and does the typical screen of my eyes. Nothing invasive, nothing crazy. Just, can I read it? Literally the eye chart. I've been going to this same eye doctor for a few years. Can I read the eye chart? I then sit down and they take my blood pressure. Well, they take the blood pressure by sticking my little finger in the thing, and they do basically just the easiest way to take your blood pressure. My blood pressure, when they took it, was 220 over 140.
I didn't know that.
No, you didn't.
Did you reset those life insurance
I
policies
didn't
we
know
got
that.
on each other?
I'm like, whoa, that seems a little off right there. And the technician freaks out, walks out, and is like,
I don't want to be here when you pop.
Yeah, this guy's getting ready to pop. The eye doctor walks in and literally puts on says, hey, we need to check this out. She asked me a few questions and puts on the cuff, takes the blood pressure. Blood pressure is basically 125 over 82. So the technician may or may not have put it on right. It just didn't read right. Whatever the case is, but it didn't read right. My point is, what's the biggest priority? It ain't my eyes. It ain't the eye chart. It's the blood pressure that she just took. In our profession, that's how we need to look at things. Person walks in, we need to check the boxes. Taking my blood pressure going into the eye doctor is checking a box. That technician that put the thing on my finger and just did the most basic form was just to check a box to make sure I wasn't about to pop.
Right.
Once they figured out that, okay, this screening at the most fundamental level picked up something, now I need to go that direction and not that direction. And that's what we've been doing, Gray, but we did it with movement.
Well, and we were surprised at some of the initial resistance that we got, because prior to what we did, there's never been a movement screen before. And I could maybe argue that we probably didn't need one quite a while ago because everybody had basic competencies because we walk so much and we just did a lot more physical labor than we do. So the sheer friction of life kept you functional enough not to have the kind of risk factors that we're uncovering right now. But we're putting total knees in 40-year-olds. We literally have kids and teenagers with balance disorders. They don't know it unless we check. But this whole thing about screening movement, I think just because of where we set in our local hometown, in a clinic, sports medicine outreach, general orthopedics, we saw repeat customers and saw a pattern in them. And we saw people who got better and stayed better for a while. And we saw a pattern in them. And so we started trying to capture those pinch points. I think one of the, let's be honest, we were pretty good with exercise. What we wanted to know is which one of the exercises was the best choice, just like a
Again,
dosage.
minimum. What's the biggest
minimum?
number one thing that's going to have the biggest impact?
So if you don't know what to do, seriously, to fix a left-right balance asymmetry, why would you screen it? Because if the screen says if this, then this, if that, then that, and you only have glute activation, what if that doesn't change balance? That completely undermines your paradigm because you tried to convert a movement problem to a quick little exercise snippet. But if you go back and recheck yourself, what you'll see is many of the exercises that are great for conditioning don't change movement quality. Many of the exercises that are great for changing movement quality are not your workout. They are your prep, your warm-up. So with athletes, what we've been doing for the last 2 years is saying, all right, nobody's got time for correctives. Nobody's got time to fix their shoulder mobility asymmetry. Everybody's focusing on the thing. We got a 15-minute warm-up. And what you just said about your eye visit is something I'm going full circle. The minute you ping the blood pressure screen, that's a vital sign, okay? Your eyes can be cloudy today. That's not going to kill you. That's a risk factor of your vision is declining. So what actually happened at that place is their initial screen was for vital signs, just to make sure that you're ready and we're examining a normal person, not a person in distress or acute stress, okay? The minute they resolve the fact that you're ready for testing, we moved on with it. And you either got issued the same prescription or an upgrade for your eyes. Now, if we apply those two words, what is your screen for are they ready? But what is your screen for do they have future risk? And if I can basically look at the exercise the way we've been doing it for the last year and a half, I'm basically taking the warm-up, the prep, the calibration, and I'm getting a general warm-up, meaning a better state of readiness. How do we know that? Well, their body temperature went up, their flexibility's improved, their asymmetry's improved, and their balance is improved. Grip strength will give you another one, but they're a little bit more ready than they were 5 minutes ago. Secondly, if we can aim that warm-up at your T-spine mobility and my ankle mobility, wow, we just handled readiness for today and chipped away a little investment for risk tomorrow. Would a whole corrective session change movement better? Yeah, that ain't going to happen. We're realistic. Minimum effective dose. If you're out there with athletes right now, thinking through the warm-up, and Lee and I are going to show you how to do this in just a minute, and then realizing, all right, we got to get them ready, but most of my guys are really tight hips this year, and I don't know why. Or everybody's having a hard time with that forward bend, hip hinge, toe touch, or we got a lot of asymmetrical shoulders because we're a throwing sport. You can actually do a 2-for-1 and you can actually measure it. And that's a pretty cool and convenient thing because in the early days of movement screening and fixing the things you find, we literally, almost had to pull people away from their workout. That's not popular, but it worked. Stop doing the bad thing, start doing the good thing, you get better. But we realize life is in parallel. We can modify your workout, change your warm-up, add in some stuff that doesn't even look like correctives, but it is, and measure a better result.
And that's what our focus has been really from day one. But what we've learned during that journey is that we have to really look at all these other risk factors that impact movement, which led us to the functional wellness screen, which is really one of the things we've been working on working along before the last couple of years. But great, if you think about it, the last couple of years, we've done 8 different courses. We put out 8 courses over the last couple of years, and that's the things we've been working on, which takes us a little bit unable to come out and do these podcasts and sets us up, in my opinion, to be able to have a better conversation in these environments that we want to do. And going back, and let's just kind of segue right into what we will really want to talk about today is a lot of this data that we were able to pick up on looking at what should be the premier fit people in the world. And that's the healthcare providers, as well as fitness professionals, strength conditioning, performance, that whole bucket. Plus, we have a lot of physical therapists, chiropractors, medical providers that come in to see healthcare providers that come to these Perform Better summits, as well as fitness and strength conditions performance people. You'd like to think we are one of the most healthy populations around. But what we found, Gray, what Gray just described, we go to these things with Symmio, our functional wellness screen, Symmio platform. You can screen yourself. We went in and we screened what we determined is the 8 most important areas in your wellness in 15 minutes with a group of 125 people. So I've got the data right here. We want to talk about this data and what it tells us. And it tells us if you're a professional, you need to start taking care of yourself a little bit more, making yourself maybe more of a priority. And we're not saying that as a cliche. I think we all, just humans, we need to put ourselves first. But I think in our profession, we tend to get so consumed with helping other people that we forget that, you know what, maybe we need to help ourselves.
And it hits you pretty hard. I guess what we're preparing you guys for is exactly what we went for the last 5 years. If you hear yourself say something to a patient that you're currently not doing, then there's a bit of a lack of integrity that just sort of seeps out of you. But if you're doing it, there's a bit of integrity that seeps out of you. And we were just talking about those 8 domains. If we take a functional approach, a bare minimum approach, the movement screen that we're doing for wellness is way easier, faster, and more convenient than a functional movement screen. And we actually did that wellness screen on a room full of fitness, healthcare, and strength conditioning professionals. And what we found, and I would think if we'd conducted parallel fitness tests, we had a room that is probably 2 notches above the average level of fitness, but exactly the same wellness as the rest of the world, as the rest of the country. And that means your culture is influencing your lifestyle. Even though your job may be in exercise, rehabilitation, or healthcare, you're not any better at self-care than the people you're training.
Worse.
You're fitter because you got more sets, reps, and you get on the treadmill or you try to keep your biceps pumped up a little bit. But ultimately, sleep problems, movement pain, shallow breathing, nutritional awareness, not nearly as bad in that group as it could be, say, in a college group or, somebody who's not in touch with that. Past medical history issues unaddressed, behavioral health. Most of them got activity level covered, and that's why I made that statement. They're highly active, but no more well and no more protected than somebody who's less active, which actually means not protected, more exposure.
Let's just go through the data.
Okay.
And let's just tell you what we are finding now. We've got about over 6,000 data points or users in our database at this point. That's significant. And again, this data is self-reported. So people are going through the movement screen or going through a movement screen plus lifestyle components, all the things Gray just mentioned. And out of the roughly 275 people we tested, well, I'm looking at the data, 272 people, 96 were in the high-risk category. Roughly 40%, 38% are in that high-risk category. Now, what does that mean? That means that based off of the best evidence and the algorithms that we've proven using FMS, using movement, using Y balance, using lifestyle components, you are more likely than not to have a musculoskeletal problem.
All right. And we got there by screening each domain, but it's not what you think. A sleep survey can put you in a risk category for your sleep. I don't need a wearable. I don't need a sleep study. I don't need a lab. We have proven that a survey of your sleep habits and the way you feel creates just enough question to say we should go deeper. Same thing with breathing. A simple breath hold test and a few of our criteria at least scratch the surface to say most people who test like this have an issue that should be vetted, and most people that pass this probably this isn't their biggest problem.
So of these, let's say roughly 40% of these healthcare, remember who the population is. These are professionals in the healthcare and health and wellness world. Let's just say that, right? 40% are in this bucket, 40% are in this bucket of high risk, which means they've got pain in multiple movement patterns. So not just one, multiple. One painful pattern will put you in what we look at as the moderate category. Now, 70% are in the high and moderate category. So you're talking about a significant part of the population in this sample size, which is a pretty significant sample size, different parts of the world, different parts of the U.S. So we looked at Florida, we're up in the Northeast, Midwest, out in the West Coast, getting this sample size. And it is pretty representative, in my opinion. Now, so pain in multiple patterns, pain from an injury that you haven't seen someone for. So you could have pain, but if you tell us that you're actually seeing or under the care of a physician, you're not going to be in that high risk category. So we're taking the—
You're being monitored and managed. So
right. So we're not going to say if you're being monitored and managed, you're okay. We're not saying you're okay, but we're not going to put you in that category. So we are really drilling down. So knowing kind of the back end of that, Gray, knowing who we're talking about, it's significant. Meaning, and here's the other thing we know that if you're in this high risk, not only are you heading to a problem, more times than not, you can't DIY it. You can't do it yourself to get out of that high risk category. You need some help.
No, that is an important factor, I think, for professionals to embrace first, because it's a business opportunity, but it's a different kind of business opportunity because you're not really issuing a treatment for somebody's wellness like you would an acne medicine. A wellness is a lifestyle, habitual, behavioral change, and that's why drug companies make so much money. Don't change your behavior, Lee. Just go ahead and get gout and then take this uric acid medicine and neutralize that. Or keep eating the Kentucky Fried Chicken, but don't forget to take your statins. Nobody ever tells you to modify your behavior as eloquently as they tell you how to take your medicine. And your medicine is protecting you from the actual results of your own bad behavior. So we have a little bit of disconnect between that. But one of the things that I think is important is Lee and I aren't just saying if all of these risk factors are present in your client, in your athlete, or in your patient when you're finishing up with them, that they're going to instantly have another injury. What we're saying is your risk factors for having a problem or not achieving any of your goals are equally risky. Meaning, if you've got a weight loss goal for somebody in a high risk category, it's not going to happen. You will not be able.
Weight loss is not the priority for that person.
No, but if the only reason they're coming to you is weight loss, make that the priority and say these three dominoes need to fall so that will work.
But it's still, though, if you're in that high risk category, you're in that high risk category not because, you could argue, yes, because you're overweight, but there's other things that you got to address first in order to help this person lose weight. So weight loss is not the priority the way a professional should be. So look, if you come to me with this high risk category, what does that tell me? That tells me first, because this is a screen, right? It's a screen. No different than me going to the doctor, the eye doctor, and them saying, oh, your eyes aren't the biggest problem. When you come in, if you're looking to lose 20 pounds and you're in the high risk category, I, as a professional, need to go further. I need to now say, all right, weight loss, we're going to put a pin in that. Well, let's dive in to see, why are you in this high risk category? Remember, a screen only gives you direction. Doesn't tell you ultimately the problem. You, as a professional, need to dive a little bit deeper. But now I went, instead of making this decision, I've now made this decision. And now I've got to dive deeper. But for looking at some of this data, far and away, the biggest problem, two of the biggest areas, is sleep and behavioral health. Now, if the person comes in and they have a behavioral health problem and they got a sleep problem, well, don't you think those two are related? And don't you think trying to address maybe the behavioral health and giving them some strategies, and again, having that conversation, right? Is weight loss tied to behavioral health problems? Of course it is.
Yeah.
But again, it's giving you more insight and more direction on where you need to take the conversation as much as anything for a person who is triggering behavioral health. And out of the 272, we got 103 people that trigger behavioral health as something that needs to be focused on. We got 143 people that says sleep needs to be something that needs to be focused on.
And there's an important thing here. When we came up with the movement screen, it's not like, if we could have done it with one movement pattern, we would have, because that was easier. And we were dumb and we were lazy and we would have taken the same out that anybody else wants. I want it cheaper and easier and faster, and I want to look smarter while I'm doing it. Good. That's a fairy tale. We wound up is the bare minimum we could do for athletic readiness, I think, was about 7 patterns. Okay. Now, when people want to really talk about changing themselves or getting rid of one of these risk factors, the majority of people that we did cluster around a sleep problem. Now, does that mean we're going to generally get everybody on a Tempur-Pedic mattress and tell them to quit watching blue screens? We know the general ways to protect your sleep, but a high percentage of these people were in pain. A higher percentage had a behavioral health problem, anxiety, depression. I don't know what it is, but they got something going on. Can pain or anxiety or depression interfere with your sleep? We've got breathing problems and we've got some BMI problems. Can they interfere with sleep? So my whole point is, it'd be real easy to have a movement screen with a deep squat, and everybody who can't get your exercise, and everybody who can get something different. It's not like that. Some of these people aren't sleeping for different reasons.
Well, great. Let's take it to now. Let's get into our wheelhouse.
All right.
Movement.
All right.
You look over to the movement side, and we do 5 tests. We look at your ability to. We look at shoulder mobility, your toe touch, your squat, your balance, and rotation. Now, you just said the FMS says 7 tests. This is a little bit less stressful, I will say, because this is wellness. This is checking the things that you do every day. Can you reach? Can you touch your toes? Can you squat? What's mobility like? So we don't need to get and stress you at a little bit higher level. If you're an athlete or you're looking to engage in higher levels of activity, we need to do that. Back to my point. The number one, far and away, the biggest problem with this group across all groups, shoulder mobility. So Gray, now let's take that and let's unpack that a little bit. Shoulder mobility is the biggest problem. Now flip over to think about the lifestyle, behavioral health, and sleep. Don't you think all those are connected?
I do. And I will be honestly, as a physical therapist, you tell me that you got hip problems, hip mobility problems, I'm going to look at your low back. And you tell me you got shoulder problems, and I'm going to look at your neck. I'm hoping not to find a problem, because I'd much rather work on a shoulder than a C5 nerve root, rotator cuff tear, blah, blah, blah. But the level of complexity is going on. These people are probably shallow breathers, way more upper trap than lower trap. Okay. They're probably in some degree of, even though they're fit people, there's a lot of sedentary activity. I mean, physical therapists sit and chart a lot and stuff like that. So my point is, these are people who have resources to clear up their own mobility, stability problems, and pain, and they've given up. Or healthcare is not helping them, and they can only foam roll but so much.
So the picture we're painting here with this group, and these are professionals, healthcare providers, fitness providers, strength and conditioning professionals. Large majority have shoulder problems. Large majority have a lot of stress and anxiety and aren't sleeping. So how do you attack that? So if this was we're talking about 272 people here. Generally speaking, if I was just going to give a blanket program to this group, it's handling your stress, breathing, doing some basic stuff for upper body mobility, and then some basic advice on sleeping better, which maybe for this group, maybe different positions to sleep in.
Yep. And the one other thing that I did is at the end of this thing, when we had all these health and fitness professionals and we sized them up, Lee and I walked across the hall and put them literally in one of our flows. It was modified. It's right up on YouTube right now, called the Symmetry Flow. I picked that one because Lee looked at me and said, the majority of this room has a shoulder problem. But if I look under that, I see breathing problems and balance problems. And then always got the sleep problem. All right, I think I got something for that. So since they had a shoulder mobility problem, we have a test that is so ridiculously simple and lines right up the FMS. It's a paper pass right behind your back. I said, bring your paper over here. We did a 15-minute little movement thing. It stressed their balance, their symmetry, their shoulders, and their breath. I think 2/3 of the room passed their paper better, meaning they improved their shoulder mobility on the fly. Believe it or not, they improved their balance too, because they were really struggling to do that. Those people who improve that quickly, I can take one more step. Did you actually change your tissue, or did you just dump a lot of unnecessary muscle tone from listening to Gray and Lee sit there and talk for 2 hours? We dump tone. Now, since you have a sleeping problem, since you had a shoulder problem, since you had a balance and breathing problem, what if you did this thing before bed? Obviously, it'd be a great warm up for the activity that you're doing, but what if you did this before bed? Because then I asked the room a question. How many of you guys would love a massage right before you go to sleep? And the whole room raised their hand. I'm like, okay, that's never going to happen. Next best thing, stretch a little bit. And if it doesn't affect your sleep, then you're not obligated to do it. But if you're in a way to track your own sleep or a wearable or any other metric that you'd use to say, I just feel a little bit better today, even if it's not bags under your eyes, maybe we can repeat that activity and see if we have a cumulative effect. So this is the elegant way I think we can really have a bare minimum intervention in somebody's lifestyle. Now, if just doing a tension dump that's movement specific, breathing specific before bed helps your sleep, well, we've already given you a bunch of other good general sleep advice. You pack this specific thing on top of that, now we're getting somewhere. You're becoming aware that you're carrying far more tension than you're able to dump. And even if you went on your 5-mile jog today, apparently you didn't dump the tension. Okay, so psychologically you might need the run, but add this tension dump to it and maybe you'll get the benefit of the wellness effect too.
Yeah, the other thing to this is the people that you don't need to worry about, right? So the flip side, so it's all, as professionals, we must focus on the people that are in the high risk, moderate risk. What are their problems? Unpack it, give them better advice, get them a little bit more into the lower risk category. And as long as we're moving in the right direction, the one thing, and looking at this data and looking at how we're trying to use this wellness information, we know as humans, we're going to fluctuate. Some days going to be better than others. And whether Gray loves wearables, whether you're into wearables and you keep an eye on that, or whether you get on here and do some of these, not all of these questionnaires, not all of this information, maybe you're just looking at balance, maybe you're just looking at the paper pass, knowing that every day is going to give us something a little bit different. And you may be more stressed out today than you were last week. You may be traveling, you may be sleeping in a hotel, not getting much sleep. Whatever the case is, it's going to go up and down. But if we can keep the trend going a little bit more up than down, that's all we need to think about. And that's why we try to make this as simple as we can. This is something we want to make really, really simple. And I would argue, Gray, for you, that's what wearables do for you. You just keep an eye on the gauges and making sure you're not trending down. And sometimes, obviously, we're going to go down some, but let's keep that trend going up. And that's the other thing we're trying to bring to this.
Well, how I got to wearables. Symmio proved to me that sleep was my biggest problem. Okay. Activity level wasn't my biggest problem. My second biggest problem was pain in a few patterns. Sleep and pain play off of each other. I can track my pain. I'm pretty good at that. That's my profession. I really didn't understand sleep personally. I understood the physiology of sleep, but I didn't understand how deep a hole I was in. Now, my wife told me, and you've noted the fact that I can't sleep on the road when we're traveling and stuff like that, so I get a little cranky and over-caffeinate. But literally, the wearable has kept me in check. And I know it's not a set of training wheels. I literally have invested in the things that help me sleep better. I've learned a little less alcohol is a benefit. A little less late nights is a benefit. Consistent wake time in the morning is a benefit. No strip is a benefit. Cold room is a benefit. So I don't necessarily make everybody wear a wearable, but my whole point is if your biggest problem is in something that can be tracked for a couple of $100s, you're going to spend that much on your next freaking medication.
And if you think about, part of our goal here, you've said it, I've said it, we all, if you're a professional, you know this, it is about behavioral change and your lifestyle. Even movement is based a lot on your lifestyle and your environment. It's about awareness. First step, if you're going to have behavioral change, create awareness. That's all this little screen is set up to do. Create some awareness about your own individual current status. Where am I today? And I think, and I don't want to get down that rabbit hole about where that's confused people when we talk about movement, because people in the movement screen world, some of the criticism is like, I screened you today, but next week I screen you and you're different and you're worse. Well, if movement's a behavior, it's a lot of other factors that we're trying to capture now that we weren't capturing 20 years ago, 15 years ago. My point here, by looking at it as awareness and making it simple, keeping your eyes on it, but also knowing exactly, because that's the other part of what we do here, is we gives you really some very simple, basic strategies, recommendations on what your problem is. And I think that's the other big thing. I could take these 272 people and give you a quote unquote wellness program, which is what most people already know. Most people know you need to sleep better. You need to exercise. I know I maybe need to stretch a little bit more, whatever the case is. Everybody around the world knows it. And if you just slap 272 people and give them a wellness program, you're not going to have a lot of engagement. But if I can tell you what you personally need, that hopefully will create a little bit more engagement.
No, and like I said, the offer is to you guys too. Take this little wellness thing, because I don't care how fit you are, it's going to catch something if it needs to be caught. We've done this on D1 athletes, and it's amazing how much it lines up with much more invasive tests like an FMS, a YBT, full musculoskeletal.
And the D1 athletes did better than the professionals.
Yeah.
Generally speaking.
Yep.
Which is surprising.
Yeah, than the professionals that are guiding them.
Yes.
Okay. Well, a little bit older, got more baggage, but my whole point is, when you're going to deal with it? When you're older? So it's really has been both where my personal life and profession come together. I'm actually in a position now where my profession that I'm doing is helping my own personal lifestyle. And I honestly think that on the other side of investing in your own wellness, you become smoother talking about wellness. And I told this story in the room, and I've been treating my patients past year and a half with some version of this wellness screen, right? And it's so simple and so easy, and I can get some of my patients to do it before they come in. And one of my patients is a candidate for a spinal fusion, but he's got a lot of other stuff going on too. And I basically, he said, "Do you think I should get a low back fusion?" And I said, "I'd make that decision 35 pounds from now." I'd have never said that before, because I was raised by Reverend and Mrs. Linwood Cook, and I'm a Southern gentleman, and you just don't talk to people about their weight and stuff like that. This guy's talking to me as a professional. He ain't talking to me in the church parking lot. So I know he can lose weight. I know he can eat better. I know he can sleep better. I know he can breathe better. This ain't a good time to make a decision on an elective surgery. You're going to be a horrible candidate for rehab. And let me just say this straight out. This protects me. I am ultimately every day worried about my professional reputation and the kind of quality of work I do. If you don't follow my advice, I have a tracking module for that. But if you show up with way more risk factors than I've calculated in, I'm not going to hit the mark. You are not going to be feeling better by the time I projected, because I didn't know you were going through a divorce. I didn't know you had a pin in your ankle, and I didn't know you were only sleeping 2 hours a night. Now, sometimes I can get to that in the history, but you'd be surprised how many times a little app in the privacy of your own home makes you talk a little bit cleaner about the real lifestyle you got. So don't anybody get this wrong. If you are as concerned about your professional reputation as me, then I want my predictions and projections and programs to hit the frickin' mark. Their goal, their diagnosis, their problem is 50% of the equation. The risk factors they bring to that problem are the other 50% of that equation. And if you're not looking at risk factors, start doing it on yourself, then do it on a close group of people that you trust their feedback, and slowly onboard it into your practice, because that's exactly what I was going through when I wrote The Business of Movement. The Business of Movement ain't about exercise no more. It's literally about reading the dashboard that you and I are trying to create, so people can use self-care, not just home exercise program to fix themselves. It's made me a better therapist, because it's actually given me the professional latitude. I'm not a sleep expert, and I'm not a nutrition expert, but I know the 4 most inflammatory foods on the planet, and I know how much you can sleep and not hurt yourself. I know how little you can sleep and not hurt yourself. So if you're under both those marks, if you're eating an inflammatory diet and sleeping less than required for good healing, I don't have to be an expert. We can try a few things to help it, or I can send you to one. Either way, your back pain is going to take a little bit longer than everybody else's around here because of the baggage you brought. But I'm invested, but you got to take your risk factors as seriously as you do your L4-5 disc herniation.
And one thing you hit on there, we all have a little baggage. It's how much baggage do you have? We all got a little bit of stress. We all are battling, trying to make sure we're exercising, getting enough sleep, drinking enough water, eating right. We're all doing that. And we all have a little bit of problems here and there. It's how much baggage do you have? And if you get to a certain point that your baggage is adding up, that's where you're going to be. That's where it becomes a slippery slope. And that's what we're doing. That's why, if I've got pain in my shoulder, okay, great, or not great, but you got some pain in your shoulder, fine. If I got pain in my shoulder, pain in my knee, pain in my back, again, that's more and more baggage. Same with your lifestyle. All right, my shoulder hurts. I'm not sleeping right. I've got to behave. I've got a lot of stress in my life. And oh, by the way, I'm not eating very well. Well, then that's a lot of baggage. And that's the thing we're trying to hit on as we look at overall wellness, and not just to say everything's bad, everybody's in a bad place because they've got one little problem. No, we all got a little problem here and there, just don't have a lot. And I think to just kind of put a bow on this or wrap this up, we definitely invite you to do this. I mean, we designed this as a way for anyone to be able to do quick and easy at home. And again, it is self-reported. So the question I've gotten, well, how many people can cheat? Well, you're cheating yourself. It's your test. These are your results. This is what you need. These are the things that you need to focus on. So definitely invite you to go on and try it out.
Yeah, try this with a few clients or athletes. If you guys want to sort of re-examine your own personal perspective to wellness, I think this app, Symmio, is going to help you do it. If you're inspired by that and you want to take it back to your practice, that's what I wrote the Business of Movement for. This is the secret tool that I was talking around in that whole book. It was already in play, and I was actually becoming a different movement practitioner as I was writing that book, simply because I was being given more information, more assets, and it literally helped. Because, if you have a sleep problem and a pain problem, I don't have to fix your pain. I just got to get you sleeping better. Now I'll know how much of this is pain and how much of this is being highly inflamed with a lot of cortisol. So it is really simpler and easier, but don't take this to your worst patient, client, or athlete right away. Just like we used to say about the movement screen, do it to yourself. If you work in a business, it's a great team building effort. If you have a few trusted clients, patients, or athletes, try there first. Otherwise, it's glad to be back. I'm glad to be back. It's good to be doing new stuff with you guys. I'm actually inspired because we're coming at it the same old way. Function means, is it good enough? And if it's not good enough, the way we talk about it, we don't just run at people and say you're dysfunctional. We just say, oh, your sleep's out of balance. Let's get that back in balance. Hey, your shoulder's out of balance. Let's get that back in balance. And it winds up being a positive opportunity, even though behind the scenes, we know it's risk. We know they're not going to hit their goal if they don't do the right thing. We talk about the advantages and the opportunities and the really easy stuff that we have nowadays, like wearables that literally cost less than most of your medications. Seriously. So next time somebody's, debating whether to get a wearable or not, a dashboard for the important things in your life or something else to cover it up. Which are you doing? By the way, looks like you've been on a yacht all summer, and I've been at the farm. So
that's pretty typical.
If you're watching us on YouTube, we got Yacht Rock over there and Duck Dynasty over here. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. That will do it for this episode of the Movement Podcast.
Thanks for listening. And if you liked what you heard, please take a minute and subscribe and review.
If you want to learn more about our system and take the next step in your own movement journey,
visit us at movementpod.com.
Until next time, be sure to first move well,
then move often.